So if you come to feel the principle in your heart, what happens quite naturally is you start applying that principle to every situation you're in. And so an example of that is, let's say you have faith that meeting people's addictions is not a good thing. So let's say you develop faith in that. So in other words, you have faith that you must not meet a person's addictions and it will bring the best outcome. So that's what you have faith in. Let's say.
Or can we say it in a more direct way? The best thing I can do is not meet people's addictions.
Yeah. And you have faith that that's true, right? So when you have faith in that, every time somebody tries to engage you in addiction, you just won't do it. Right? And you'll see the benefits of not doing it in every case. Like where it would have led you and then where you didn't go because you didn't do it. You know, where that other thing could have led you and you didn't do it and so it didn't lead you down that garden path either. And you start seeing all the benefits of it and you start measuring it. But if it's in your heart, you can do that. If it's not in your head or just as a concept, you're not going to do it. People are going to engage in addiction with you and you'll be right. You'll be right in it and then afterwards you go, oh, there I was in that addiction again. But because you don't have faith that not responding to a person's addiction is a good thing, you keep responding. You'll keep responding to their addictions, thinking that you're doing good when actually it's just harming you and them. And the consequences will be shown to you quite clearly through that. So there's another example how faith in a truth, which is not to meet people's addictions. So that's the truth. That's the loving thing, and it's also the truth. If you have faith in it, it can benefit your life greatly. But on earth, again, the average person has faith in the opposite of that. And that's why we have such a mess on earth. In fact, there's a lot of things on earth that wouldn't get done at all without addiction at the moment. Most people wouldn't clean unless there was addiction involved. So in other words, you take away all the cleaners that are paid, how many people would clean? Would there be rubbish collectors? If you took away all the paid rubbish collectors, who would collect rubbish? How many people really want to collect rubbish? Because you could have a passion for collecting rubbish, because you could have a passion for dealing with it, but the average person who does it at the moment is doing it for a wage. So they're in an addiction doing it. And so you took away the wage, what do you take away? You walk down a city street in one of the big cities like New York or San Diego, Los Angeles, where we were, and there was no rubbish collection. It would be, there's like 12 million people in a small space with no rubbish collection. It'd be a major disaster within a few days, right? And it would just be worse and worse and worse with every day, right? And this is the thing, is that there are a lot of things on earth that are only functioning right now because of addictions in the wrong direction. Faith in the wrong direction. Yeah. And you start seeing that as well. Yes, all right. Elle.
I just want to follow on from the principle of faith,
Yeah.
and your example of not meeting people's addictions.
Well, I suppose what we're doing was illustrating where we with faith. If you understood the principle, how it would impact your daily life in terms of what you choose to do.
And my question is, if you had that principle in your heart,
Yeah.
say with example, like we often try not to meet people's addictions, but you don't have faith in that, say, truth.
Yeah.
And so
Then
then
you'll still continue to be
continue
doing
to, but if you had the faith, would it be a feeling because you'd automatically recognise that it was addiction because there's this feeling that happens?
Correct. So
rather
this is
than try
before
so
you
hard.
even understood the sort of even the badness of addiction. If you had faith in the truth that addiction
Meeting addictions is bad,
bad,
always leads to bad.
always
things.
leads to badness, then you could see that would help you a lot to recognise the potential addictions that could lead you astray,
Yeah.
one way or the other.
And you wouldn't have to know all of them or understand a whole lot of stuff because the principles I don't really understand how, but it's...
Well, you become, when the principle is in your heart, you become sensitive to every time it's broken. So this is a very interesting part about principles. Is like, if the truth principle is in your heart, then every time you've acted or somebody else has acted out of harmony with truth, you feel it straight away.
Yeah.
When it's in your head, you don't know. You like you just try to guess really, what's happening here, what's happening there. But when it's in your heart, you can feel that no, something's gone wrong here, and when the principle is there. So most people don't understand the economy of principles being in your heart. If the principle is in your heart, it's a very economical way to live your life, because you'll automatically be able to be sensitive to when something's off or wrong or not worth pursuing or worth doing, even though it looks like it's not necessarily worth doing. And you know, there's all sorts of things that you can now see because your principle's in your heart that you couldn't see before. And a part of your soul's sense of sight is developed by principle. So in other words, that you will not see the things that you are unprincipled about. So you physically can't even see them with your eyes. You can't even see them when your soul is unprincipled. Now, an illustration of that is the majority of you can't see when two people are in an addiction with each other. And that's because your soul, your physical eyesight is responding to the lack of principle in your soul about that matter. So let's say you've got a man and a woman and they're actually in addiction with each other. For many of you, you can't even see that. Like, you can't even see they're in addiction with each other because your own eyesight can be looking at them and observing them but not seeing it.
Because you're not feeling.
Because you're not sensitive to the principle that when people meet addictions, it's bad for them, right? And so you won't even, you'll be watching an event and it will be happening right in front of you, and it's like it's not even happening to you. You're like, you don't even see it happening. You don't even think it's happening, right? And this is an example of how even your own physical eyesight, what you listen to, is the same. Many people hear conversation and they don't really hear that conversation, and because most of us hear it through our lack of principles, right? So the lack of principles affects your hearing, your eyesight, your sense of touch, taste, touch, all sorts of things. Your lack of principles affect. And most people don't realise how practical it is to have principles because they don't see the relationship between the principle in the soul and how it affects the sensory application in the two bodies, physical and the spirit body. The whole physical and spirit body's senses even come alive when you're applying principle.
Or when the principle's within you, hey?
Yeah, when it has to be in your heart for it to work, but that's how it works. So an example of that is you could be with your soulmate but not in a soulmate relationship until you apply principle.
Oh. So you'd be with your soulmate but not recognise that you're soulmate.
Until you apply principle.
Understand the principle.
Yeah. Remember I said to you guys a few weeks ago that some of you have met your soulmate,
Yeah.
at least one of you have met your soulmate but you didn't even know, right?
Yeah.
Now, and that's because of the lack of principle.
Yeah.
See, if the principle is in your heart, right,
Yes.
then you automatically recognise things. You automatically see things you otherwise would not see.
But El, you know this. It's just that you don't understand what you know.
Mm.
You're sort of like mystified, but I know you, and I know you know why you don't recognise your soulmate when they're in front of you, but you just don't understand that conceptually as about principles.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what
And
I'm
that-
noticing.
yes.
It's like when I'm listening to you, I'm going, yes, and that's what I'm trying to understand the concept in relation to my feelings. Am I?
Yeah, an example of this. At your soul level, most people are sensitive enough, like when I say sensitive enough, the soul is literally linked to the other half of the soul.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the two halves of the soul are joined together. But the average person, when they meet their soulmate, doesn't recognise them at all. Right? Now that can only happen because of a lack of principle inside the soul. And the lack of principle being, my addictions are more important than love is. Right? So the principle of addiction, for example, is stopping me from seeing my soulmate when I meet them. Right? So I meet my soulmate, I can't even see them. I see them as a person, like, there's Mary, she's pretty, the other hair, and she's got wings, whatever. I see them, but I don't see them in the sense I don't see, that's the other half of me. I don't see that.
Most of us are so out of harmony with the love principle when it comes to love of self and truth about our true nature. We can't even recognise it in another because we're opposing it in ourselves.
Yeah, our addictions
We
are
hate it in
opposing the
ourselves.
principles.
Yeah.
So while I'm in the addiction, I'm not going to be able to, I can meet my soulmate, but I'll never know who it is.
Yeah.
Really, in my heart, I won't know. I might get told even though I still won't know. There's many people in the spirit world who are told who their soulmates are, and they don't believe the people who told them.
Or they're just uninterested.
Yeah. And there's, do you have to understand I know they try and understand these concepts, but I really have to understand in my head these concepts and just get it.
Well, your head understanding will result when your heart understanding occurs.
Fully.
Yeah, your head understanding won't happen before then.
Alright, so I'm still in the process of
So-
understanding.
This is just, sorry if I can just give you personal feedback, this is your worry about intellectual concepts that gets in the way of you in these discussions. Because you start to, I know you and I know you, there's some things you don't fully grasp emotionally yet, but you do grasp a lot of things emotionally, but when we start talking in language about principles now, and you're like, I'm in a panic, what is a principle? And then you can't apply what you already know to the new idea, because it's a worry about intellectual concepts.
So yeah, I'm out with the principle in regards to how I view intellectual.
Well, you're in fear around intellect, which is not seeking, it's not open, it's not receptive, it's fear.
And that's when I think.
And that's when you can't understand.
Yeah. But also that indicates that you're being brought up in an environment that believes intellect is all powerful and emotions are of lesser importance. So you haven't yet emotionally accepted that actually emotions are more important, even though you're good at them. You haven't accepted that yet.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
And I'm going to decide, definitely.
So a person can be good at something without even knowing, really that they're good at it, and at the same time be working against it in their mind.
And that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But it's very important to understand that you physically cannot even see a situation unless the principle is there. So a lot of times Mary and I, we'll be looking at the same situation. Mary sees it quite differently than I do. Right? Looking at the same situation. And then when I sort of explain the situation to you, you go, oh, that was what was happening. I was confused about what was happening, but that's what's happening. And now, you can sort of grasp it, can't you? But if you were confused, it's because the principle isn't solid yet. You follow?
Or because it's not solid. There's a desire to be insensitive to aspects of the principle often.
Yes. Yeah, an active desire to be. Your faith is saying, don't believe that thing. Right? And so if you don't believe it, you're not going to see it either. You understand?
Or if it's bugging you.
So let's say your partner is a person who's quite who has quite extreme microphone is needed. Let's say your partner is a person who has quite extreme views about the fact that they're a man and so they should be the head of the house and so forth. Now, they might be kind and considerate to you, and you might feel they're very loving to you all the time, but you won't see, while you have that addiction, you will not see every single time they're condescending to you. You will not see it. You will just think, oh, no, they're loving to me. When he said he's going to look after me, he was loving to me, not, oh, hang on a sec, I don't need looking after. There's something wrong with that, right? You'll see every time, when the principle is in your heart, you'll see every time he's acting out of harmony with it.
Yeah, not just selectively.
Not selectively, yeah. And you won't, and you'll definitely not prefer him acting out of harmony with the principle. You'll feel you want him to act in harmony with the principle, and whenever he doesn't, you go, I got to say something about that, I've got to do something about that. But you won't even see it if the principle is not there. So there are many people we met on this trip, particularly in America. We met many people on this trip, many women on the trip, who fundamentally are ruled by their husbands while they believe themselves to be free women, liberated women. And yet they were completely dominated by their husbands. And these are women who have listened to Divine Truth for 15 years. Completely dominated by a husband. Can't see that they are even. Can't even see it. Quite obvious when you look at it, when you look at the situation, when the principle was there. Wow, this is really bad, what's going on here, here's what you feel, and yet they can't see it at all.
And so when we first start listening to Divine Truth, because we're principle-less from God's perspective.
Well, it's rare to find a person without any principles.
Okay, so we have misunderstandings, or we just are not necessarily in harmony with God's principles in the way of.
Correct, we're out of harmony with a lot of them.
And that's why we're so blind. That we
can't see things.
But
so the average one of you, when our dealings with the media, you can't see how bad they were. Many times you come up and say, oh, that wasn't so bad, was it? And we go, how do you work that out? It was so bad on so many levels. And yet you think it's great, or you think it's okay. The average person can't see it because the principles are not there. You see, when the principles are there, you'll see it. This is why a lot of people don't want the principles there, because they don't want to see things.
That's what I was getting at. Like, sometimes you and I are bugged by things, but we are resisting really seeing the principle, because then there would be the feelings that we have to feel and the actions we know we would want to take. That would create potential further issues that you don't want to have. More feelings, basically.
More feelings, right.
And so our faith is corrupt in that area. If we develop the actual faith principles in that it's better to feel everything, even if it's really hard. We're there to be much more sensitive and know. The key would be very knowledgeable about what exactly it was that was the problem.
Correct.
Not just being.
And you see it straight away. It's very economical once the principle's in your heart. You see it straight away. It's immediate. It's not, and you don't make any bad decisions anymore. You don't make a bad decision about that thing anymore. So an example of that is that, say a person comes along and says, oh, I want to give God's way all of this money and help and whatever, but you can feel that they're a power person and you can feel the principle being broken in them as they're doing it. You won't accept any of it. Because you know that it's just by accepting it, there's going to be lots of problems in your future if you accept it. You understand? So you won't break the principle.
Yes.
But a person who doesn't want to see the principle, oh, isn't that wonderful? This person's helping out so much. Isn't it great? Let's go ahead with that. Not realising that you're creating the road to hell for yourself and whomever is with you by just making that choice to break the principle that you didn't even know you're really breaking because you didn't know what the principle was in your heart. So this is the thing about the principles. Once they're in your heart, once you know that a choice would break them, you know, oh, this is not going to turn out good. Any principle broken, there's lots and lots of laws broken. When there's one principle broken, lots of, so you could, on the average, when you break one principle, you're breaking thousands of laws, right? There are millions of laws pertaining to the soul and how the soul works. And you break one principle, you break thousands of them at a time. Of course it's not going to turn out good. You uphold the principle, you're not going to break all of those laws automatically. You don't even need to know what the laws are. You won't break them. And so you won't get the negative consequence of having broken them in the future. Suzanne?